It's never a great sight when major world events and politics get in the way of sports. But the war in Ukraine isn't something that we can ignore. And much like other sports, the tennis world has also been raising its voice against the Russian invasion. However, Wimbledon, which is one of the most prestigious tennis majors, has perhaps taken the boldest approach yet. First up, no Russian or Belarusian players at Wimbledon. We've been hearing about a strong protest against Russia from those in charge of Wimbledon for a while. However, the actual announcement shook the whole tennis community as no one was expecting it to be this harsh. What was the announcement? Well, the All English Lawn Tennis Club, which is the organization that's in charge of Wimbledon, announced on Wednesday that they would not allow any Russian or Belarusian athletes to compete in this year's Grand Slam tournament. According to them, the decision was made after careful deliberation by keeping both government guidance and their duty to the players and the sport in mind. The official statement also cited that while the players may not be at fault for this ban themselves, it was still the need of the hour to limit Russia's global influence through the strongest means possible. Now, if you are wondering whether banning these athletes would have any substantial effect on the tournament, then the answer would be yes. There are several highly ranked players that won't be able to compete at the biggest tennis tournament in the world. The banned players include Daniil Medvedev, who currently sits at number 2 in men's world tennis rankings, and Aryna Sabalenka, who's number 4 in the women's rankings. And apart from these two, there are many others who were highly seeded for the tournament. Have any other competitions banned Russian athletes? The ban has made Wimbledon one of the first tennis events to disqualify players from Russia and Belarus. And while there are other tournaments between now and Wimbledon, like the French Open next month, there hasn't been any action taken against Russian players for those events. In fact, tennis players from Russia and Belarus have been allowed to remain on the ATP and WTA tours, which means that they can sign up for different tournaments and compete there. The only caveat with that, however, is that they cannot play under their country's names or flags. And as far as international team events like the Davis Cup are concerned, the Russian teams have been obviously barred from taking part in them. Other than that, the WTA, ATP, and the International Tennis Federation have also canceled all events that were scheduled to take place in Russia. Apart from tennis, other major sporting bodies like UEFA, FIFA, and IGF have also banned athletes from the two countries. We've seen bans all over the sporting world, including football, hockey, gymnastics, and Formula One. So while this is a new thing for tennis, it's been happening in other parts of the world for quite some time now. The general public is divided on Wimbledon's decision. Now, there was obviously an uproar when this statement was released. Obviously, those who feel strongly about the Russian invasion of Ukraine were mostly satisfied with the action, but there was perhaps an even larger majority that aired its frustration over this decision. After all, the event is only 2 months away, and announcing something so close to it can have some pretty huge ramifications. The supporters of the ban say that it would send a strong message to the Russian government, as banned athletes can act as leverage to stop the war. The UK Sports Minister, Nigel Huddleston, also came out in full support of the decision by saying that nobody flying the flag for Russia should be allowed or enabled to play in the country. He also emphasized the fact that many of these players come from influential families and might even have close ties to the Russian president. So, while the ban is a complex issue and will divide opinion, there is a bigger cause at stake. Those opposing the ban, though, are of the opinion that players should not be penalized for the decisions of their government. Most of them do not agree with what's happening in Ukraine anyway and want the war to end. Besides, when we start to ban players for the political actions of their countries, we risk going down a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line? What about all the other countries that are committing atrocities around the world? Why didn't South African athletes get banned during the apartheid then? These are all questions that might be too hard for the tennis officials to answer. Some emotionally charged tennis fans even called for a boycott of the event, saying that the decision just does not make sense and is hypocritical in its very nature. What do the players think? Now, fans being frustrated with the decision is one thing, but what happens when the players themselves are against the bans? Well, as far as the Russian players are concerned, we've seen them opposing the war multiple times during tournaments, interviews, and on social media. A few months ago, Rublev made headlines when he wrote "No war, please" on a TV camera, so it's pretty obvious that they'd be against the ban now as well. And the majority of other tennis players also agree with the same sentiment. Novak Djokovic, who is currently the world #1 tennis player, slammed the decision from Wimbledon and called it crazy. Speaking at the Serbian Open, which is his home event, Djokovic went into detail about how he will always condemn war as he was a child of war himself, referring to the 1999 bombings. But he remained firm on his stance that politics should not interfere with sport. Not everyone is against the decision, though, as several former and current Ukrainian players had been calling for this ban. For instance, Olga Savchuk, who's Ukraine's Billie Jean King Cup captain, said that the sanctions cannot be placed on 90% of the Russian people while the 10% roam free. So there's definitely some divide between the players as well. Tennis associations also issued their statements after the Wimbledon announcement. The Wimbledon management may have decided to ban Russian and Belarusian players, but the other tennis authorities are not overjoyed by the precedent that's being set. Right after the announcement from the All England Club, the ATP, which is the Association of Tennis Professionals, issued its own statement condemning the move. Discrimination based on nationality also constitutes a violation of our agreement with Wimbledon that states that player entry is based solely on ATP ratings, read their statement. The press release then went on to emphasize the importance of merit and fairness in tennis, saying that the ban is utterly unfair and has the potential to set a damaging precedent for the game. Meanwhile, WTA, which is the Women's Tennis Association, also expressed its disappointment in the decision. Their official statement mirrored that of the ATP and said that individual athletes should not be penalized or prevented from competing due to where they are from or the decision made by the governments of their countries. Could Wimbledon revert its decision? Both the ATP and WTA are the principal organizing bodies for tennis professionals, so their statements actually hold some weight. Not only that, but the ATP even went as far as to say that the decision was a violation of their agreement with Wimbledon, which means that the authority could threaten to pull out of the tournament. And with so much pressure from fans and other players as well, there is every chance that we could see Russian and Belarusian athletes take part in this year's Wimbledon come June. In fact, when asked whether the decision was set in stone, the chairman of All England Club didn't rule out the possibility of reversing the ban. He said that the tournament is still a couple of months out from now, and if the circumstances change materially between now and June, the authority could still reconsider its decision. However, he did not elaborate on what needed to change for the club to end the ban. All being said, one thing is clear: there are a lot more twists and turns still left in this tale, and we'll probably see a lot more developments as time goes on. We could see other tennis players like Djokovic even boycott the tournament, which would perhaps guarantee a reaction from the authorities. And of course, the ATP and WTA also have a lot of power when it comes to swaying unpopular decisions. For now, though, the Russian and Belarusian athletes remain sidelined from taking part in Wimbledon, and if things remain the same, we could see a very different seeding lineup in the biggest Grand Slam of the year. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think that the Wimbledon authorities' decision to ban Russian and Belarusian athletes is fair? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.